Good morning, Moms of Master Books. Hey, I'm running a little bit late today, some technical difficulty, but I am here with author Frody Jensen, the author of Jensen's Grammar, Format Writing, Punctuation, and Vocabulary. Thank you, Frody, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And we're going to dig into Jensen's Grammar, the history, and then each of the levels, and just kind of what the vision was behind it, the customer that it serves, what Frody's intention was in that. And I think what a lot of people, our audience, Master Books is rather new to publishing curriculum. We started in 2012 really publishing curriculum, but we've had opportunity to pick up some series like Jensen's. And Frody, when did you start publishing your grammar series?
27 years ago.
Wow. And why, what's the backstory behind the grammar? Like, how did you get into this and why were you doing this?
Well, I was a teacher. When I was in graduate school, I took a very interesting class. Really got my juices flowing about grammar and so forth. And I determined that, and I was also teaching at the time, I determined that there needed to be a better way to explain things to kids, because the way I grew up, there was just a lot of rules and exceptions, and there didn't seem to be any overall pattern. Mm-hmm. And so when I took this class, I found out that there were four different ways to look at grammar. The first way is what we mostly learn, called traditional or prescriptive grammar. And the second way, which was coming on the scene at that time pretty heavily, was generative or transformational grammar. Paul Roberts was the primary mover in that. And then the third way was by James Sled, that was structural grammar. So I likened it to going into the forest and seeing a little cabin. And there was a small window on each side, three sides anyway. So if you look in the window, you can see pretty much what's in the cabin, but you can't see it all. So if you go to another window, then you can see more of it. And if you look at three. So what I did was I combined those three methodologies. And when you look at that chart, the two charts in the beginning of the book, the function word and the form words, that is a look at the English language from these three different perspectives. So I had an overall grid, and it made sense to me, and it made sense to a lot of the kids. Mm-hmm. So I was teaching at the time. I got the permission from the principal, and I had a linguistics professor, and so we decided to write a grammar, which I did. And the poor kids, they were the guinea pigs. And so I go back, I talked to the fellow, my teacher, once a week, and we'd say, well, maybe we should have taught this before we taught that, or maybe this is out of order here, or maybe we should have had we need a different explanation for this. And so we kind of honed it over that period of time. And then I used it when I taught myself in the public schools. And then I had my own Christian school for 6 years, and I used it there. And at that particular point in time, the homeschool movement in Oregon got going. And so I was an umbrella school for a lot of homeschoolers. And then I did some conventions. And at one particular point in time, we were reviewing curriculum. And I liked Saxon, and so we were reviewing Saxon. And I said, I did something similar with English that Saxon did with math, namely an incremental approach and repetition. And people picked up on it and said, well, where do we get your books? And I said, well, I don't have any books. I have a bunch of dittos, and that kind of dates me, I guess. And so I decided I would put a book together, and I had always been interested in direct mail marketing. I thought it was very romantic to get checks in the mail from people I didn't even know. So I started publishing. Well, I actually, I did 4 books a year, 3 years in a row. And that was Jensen's Grammar 1, 2, and 3, and Vocabulary, Latin 1 and 2, and Greek, and the punctuation. I had major punctuation and minor punctuation, and or general punctuation, and I had the writing book. And then I was writing a series with another fellow called Journey Through Grammarland, and so I was pretty busy.
Wow. Now, did some of those get combined into the series? Like, is the grammar course now all of those grammars?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. The grammar course, the original publisher that I had was a local newspaper, and they could only do staple bind, and that limits you to 132 pages.
Okay.
So, I figured, well, I would just break it up that way. So I broke it up into quarters.
Yes.
So there were 25 lessons and 5 tests per book.
Okay. Okay. So I know we've kind of positioned it more into the junior high, high school market. But as far as progression goes, if I'm approaching you the first time and you have these 4 books, punctuation, grammar, vocabulary, and format writing, which book would I start with?
You would start with a vocabulary book.
With the vocabulary.
Because that's basic. In other words, vocabulary, first you have words, then you have sentences, and then you have paragraphs and essays, right?
Yep.
So there's a natural progression. So you would do the vocabulary first, then you'd probably do the grammar, and you could do the punctuation simultaneously, but you could also do it later.
Okay.
And then you would do the format writing, but you should do the punctuation before the writing.
Now the grammar, well, let's start with the vocabulary. That's the one, even for me, that's probably the hardest to explain to somebody else. The rest are pretty, with the lesson plan and everything, pretty straightforward. How was the vocabulary intended to be used?
Vocabulary is self-instructive. In other words, it's a teacher dream. You hand it to the kid and you say, do 1 a day. So you do Latin 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D each day for 4 days. And the 5th day, you give them a test. And the teacher makes it up. They just read the words and the kid writes the answer or gives you the answer orally,
Okay.
spells the word. And then after the first lesson, I would always include some review words.
Okay. Okay.
And that's it.
So basically,
Why you give them
the 4-day schedule, and then let me see. I'm just looking at
and the 5th day would be a test.
The review
and
day.
No tests up there except for there's a major test in there, I think, or maybe there's not. I made major tests for the quarters for the first 9 weeks and the last 18 weeks for all 3 of the books. They're on my site. Well, they can email me, and I just email them the tests and the answers. In fact, I just did that yesterday. Somebody contacted me and said, we've used your punctuation and your writing book, and we like them, and so we're going to take a jump into the vocabulary. Please send us the tests. So I said, okay, there they are.
And so if I'm the teacher and I've done 4 days of the lesson, then the review I create myself, right? I basically am quizzing them orally just from these words that were on day 1. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're the same words day 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. Gotcha. I think that answers a good question for me. Some of the it was at a booth and they were asking me, and I grabbed it on the fly. Of course, we have so many different books that we have to be the experts in, but
Right.
it was the review part. And so the review part is just orally question them on the definition. Would that be like, what would that look like? What would a review look like if you were doing it?
Well, I would take the 20 words, And I would say, all right, I'm going to give you a test. And I'm going to read the word to you. And I want you to spell it for me. And I want you to give me the definition. And now you can do that orally, or you can have them just write it down on a piece of paper, and then you pick it up and check it off against your list. And I would usually mix the words up. I wouldn't just go through 1 through 20. I might go through 1, 20, 2, 19, that way. Or you can do every other word or every third word, whatever. I would vary it when I did it in class. That's how we did it. And if I had more than one student, trade the papers. I'll just correct them that way.
Yeah. So you also use this as a spelling list.
Well, yeah, there's if you're going to grade it on a percentage basis, what I would do is when I had 25 words, it made it real easy. They get 2 points if they spell it correctly, and they get 2 points if they give the definition correctly. So you get 4 points, you got 25, you got 100, it's easy. Okay.
Awesome. This is good to know. Okay, and then for a parent, if they're using it in a junior high level, obviously credit isn't an issue, but would you consider this to have been a full year of grammar? Like would this count as the only grammar instruction for a year?
No.
Okay, so they would use this to complement.
Okay, so let's take a look. The book that you have in your hand is worth 1.5 years. Okay?
Okay.
Because Latin 1 is a full semester, 18 weeks.
Okay.
Latin 2 is another semester, 18 weeks. Greek is another semester, 18 weeks. So that's a year and a half.
Okay.
And if they do it right, and by the way I set it up, so it's a lesson a day. That's where you get the spaced repetition. That's what's key in this whole thing. The other thing that you would note here, and you can tell people this, is that they'll get a root 1 week, and then they'll get the same root the next week. So for instance, they might have stable and statutory and stationary and constable, right? But they see the same word, STA, which means to stay, 4 weeks, 10 weeks. I built these things very systematically. So a lot of times in the other vocabulary things out there, you'll get the root and you get all the words for it, and that's the only time you'll ever see it.
Yes.
This, they see it week after week after week after week.
Okay.
I have a couple of different stories. When I used to go to the conventions, and I'd have my books lying out there, and one little gal, there was a lady quizzing me. What about your vocabulary books? Why should you do this? Why should I do it? How do I do it? Blah, blah, blah. And so this girl comes up and she says, "Oh, Mom, look, he's got the second one. Let's get it." And I said, "You talk to her." And the little gal sold her. It was great.
Well,
so,
I laugh.
It's in the pudding, Randy. It does work.
Yes. Well, and this is a very highly acclaimed, your method is very highly acclaimed. I think also it's a very good point when you compared yourself to the Saxon method and the systematic method. That helps differentiate you. I often have to compare. We have 3 authors that at one time you would have battled it out on the convention floor, right? James Stobaugh, Jensen's grammar, and the writing strands. And I tell people, okay, we have 3 different things. We have a college professor who likes to ask big open-ended questions. We have a business person who enjoys more systematic and a formulaic approach. And then I have a hippie in a VW bus. And that would be the writing strands. And that's what, a lot of people then can say, well, my kid would very much enjoy a formula, systematic approach to understanding grammar or understanding vocabulary. And so that's how they know that Jensen's is a really good fit for their family. If they have that free-spirited, I have such a hard time, then it's easier to know a hippie in a VW bus may be the approach. So sometimes it's just because we have 3 different approaches in a very eclectic model. And like I say, you guys would have been battling it out on the floor at one time. It's good to have an understanding of what does differentiate and why because I think you put a lot of experience and thought into this curriculum, and we want the customer to really know, for the moms who are watching, to really know how to get the most out of the curriculum. So just understanding that vocabulary helps. So they could do this, actually, they could even spread it out a little bit and just run vocabulary for a couple of years alongside their other grammar instruction.
I would say that if you're going to start with one of the sections, the Latin 1, Latin 2, or Greek, it'd be best to just go through that section because they build. But if you go from Latin 1 to Latin 2, whole different set of roots.
Okay.
Now here's a very interesting thing, which I learned when doing these. I would spend hours in the library with vocabulary dictionaries. We build our words in English from Latin by combining a root with a whole bunch of prefixes and suffixes, like anti-disestablishmentarianism. That's got that little root STA in the middle of it, and everything else is what we would call affixes. But when we do Greek, we do it totally differently. We take two Greek words and stick them together, like geography.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally different. I did not know that until I actually got down and digging into the language itself.
Interesting.
But you could do one and then let it sit. I've had very interesting responses to the vocabulary book. One lady was tutoring a seventh grader, and the teacher in the school said, "You are too young to know these words." And he was using them, because he was learning them.
Yeah.
It was great.
That is awesome. Okay, so vocabulary would be the first. Punctuation then, because we begin working on the sentences, so they would do punctuation. Is this is the equivalent of a year?
No. You have maybe the equivalent of a little over a semester.
Okay.
If you did the major punctuation, that's the first portion of it. That basically solves about 80 to 90% of the punctuation problems that a student makes.
Yes.
And it's only a very few rules. I, CCI, I semicolon I semicolon CA, I, and sub I, I, and I sub I. That's it. You're done. Okay, so you do one of those rules a week and it compounds.
Yep.
And the first week, this says you need to learn how to recognize a complete thought or a sentence from a fragment. And then you have another 6 weeks in a review and you're done. So it's hardly a quarter. Then the major general punctuation, that's where you get all the stuff about, the dash and the quote and apostrophe and all that incidental stuff. And there's 35 or 45 lessons there, and that's probably good for another quarter.
Okay. Now the schedule that we have in here is a 180-day schedule. So if a family wanted to break it out over the year, but if I had a student who is beginning to write, but I noticed that they really just didn't understand punctuation, the sentences were a mess, this would be a great, like a refresher course. Like I could use this almost anywhere to just kind of bring a student up to speed.
It's only for punctuation.
Right.
That's, the problem with most people is they want to get their kids to writing now. I want my kid to be able to do this major paper. I want him to be able to do this. Problem is that they practice their mistakes when they don't know how to write. You see, if you get the vocabulary, then you get the sentence structure, then you know how to put sentences together into a paragraph, and then you know how to put paragraphs together to make an essay. That's the sequence.
Okay.
So a lot of people want to jump the gun. I wrote an article years ago, it's probably still on my site, called Of Horses and Carts. And too many people want to put the cart before the horse. I have these 5th grade mothers coming up at the conventions and saying, "Oh, my student needs to write this stuff." And I said, "No, he doesn't. He needs to get his sentences figured out before he starts writing paragraphs."
Right.
Come on.
So in this, they're going to get punctuation only. then from here we go to Jensen's grammar, right?
Well, I would go to the grammar first.
Oh, first.
Honestly.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Unless the student has a pretty good idea of grammar and writing. You know, every student's different. You get them in the 7th grade, and some of them have no clue, and some of them are really good.
Yes. Okay, so from the vocabulary to the grammar is, now help me with that, because I know some of that, I think we have it built on a 180-day schedule, but I think there's enough in this that it can actually be spread out a little longer. Is that correct?
I would do it. I would do it. It's really not a 180-day schedule. There's 75 lessons and 75 and 25 tests. Yeah. And so you figure that's about a semester if you did it every day.
Yeah, ours is broken out. The schedule that we have actually incorporates some of your DVD lectures and some of that. So it breaks it out over the course of a year.
Right. Okay. So I used to do grammar every day. I just said, okay, we're gonna knuckle down. We're gonna do this. We're gonna get it done. But then I was giving the lecture, and I'd give them that 10-minute or 5-minute intro, and then I'd say, all right, get to work. And if you got a question, raise your hand. And then I'd move around the class, and that's how we do it. I think that grammar every day is a tough row to hoe, but it's really effective because you keep it on. But if they're going to spread it out, I would think they should do it at least 3 times a week, preferably a Monday, Wednesday, Friday operation. You got to keep it current. You got to keep up with it. Now, when you get to the end of the thing and they take the final test, then I would say, let's say they did that in the 9th grade. All right, in your 11th grade, let's do a refresher. Let's just take a couple of the B tests to see how well you remember your stuff.
Gotcha.
And if they do, hey, great. And if they don't, say, oh, you're weak on this. You still don't get predicate nominative. So let's go back and look at that again and explain it and see what if you need to know it.
Now, does this use the same systematic approach?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there's
totally incremental and spaced repetition. I set it up so that on the day that they learn the particular item, they're going to have 3 or 4 questions about it. The next day they may have 2 or 3 questions about it. The next day they may have 1 or 2 questions. The next day they may have 1 question. But a lot of times what I've done is I've built that base so that the information they got in, say, lesson 5 is necessary to understand what's going on in lesson 12 and 17 and 22.
Right. Okay. And so that our audience that's watching understands, as far as credibility goes, how many years did you teach in the public school system?
All right, I taught for 25 years.
And then you taught 6 years, you had your own Christian school.
No, I taught 3 years in the Bay Area in the public school, and I came up here and I taught 14, and I had my own school for 6 or 7.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then I also taught at a vocational college for 2 years.
Okay.
At night school.
And I know from selling, I've actually sold this since with another company that we had. This was one of our best-selling series as well. And I know through testimonials, and your website used to be loaded with testimonials of kids who had taken your course that had succeeded in writing and in careers and that type of thing. You have a lot of success stories that go along with this. It isn't just you had an idea, but you actually, now the proof is in the pudding.
Well, that's exactly what one lady said. She said, I'd given up, but you were my last chance. And so she tried it, and she said it worked. I had one gal, well, I should say this, in my own school, when I started, I had 6 children. 2 of them were mine. And I had 1 in every grade, 6 through 11. One of the girls that came to me had tested at the 6th grade level. and she was in the 8th or 9th grade. At the end of the year, we did the standardized test. I had raised her 6 grade levels.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I have a testimony on the site from a fellow. He was in a Christian school, and they did the vocabulary. And in that particular section of the test, the whole entire school went up over 2 grade levels.
Wow. That's awesome to hear.
So it really does work, but it's the spaced repetition that does it. I'm not, unique in that I've found some particular magic bullet here. I've just taken the information that everybody else has and laid it out in a particular way that's understandable to students.
One of the things that we often say is, because we're an apologetics company, is our core, is understanding that authors' worldviews are so important. And I think for a lot of homeschool families, they tend to look at curriculum as all curriculum is equal. But it's not, because you have to look at what the methodology is of the author in the way that they write. And that's our challenge as a company, because we have multiple methodologies under the same roof. And some appeal to some families and work well with some students, and others just don't. So we're always the first to say, hey, if a curriculum isn't working, you have to evaluate it. But I think understanding that the methodology that you have is, you were very intentional in writing this. This wasn't just, I have an idea. It was a very intentional system that you put together.
Yes. See, God is a God of order. So he did not create chaos. I mean, sin came in and created some chaos, there's no question. But God is a God of order, and so he's the God of language. And as a result, there's order in our language. Yeah, we got some aberrations here and there and, exceptions and whatnot, because we're such thieves. We borrow from every, basic area. We've got words that come from Persia, and we got words that come from Spanish. We got words that come from French and, Scandinavia, all these things. So yeah, it's kind of a conglomerate mess in a way, but when you really begin to look at it and see there is a system.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so they would.
So it's to define the system. That's the key.
Gotcha. Okay, so from grammar, then the format writing. And give me the background of this and your recommendations on it.
Well, I've taught the format writing to 9th graders through 12th graders.
Okay.
It's probably better if they really understand a sentence before they start to try writing paragraphs and essays. It's also a systematic approach. It explains a paragraph. There are 7 different, and by the way, this is not creative writing, this is not fiction, this is expository writing. It's the kind of stuff that we do when we talk to people. Occasionally we'll tell them a story, but generally speaking, I'm exchanging information with you.
Right.
That's expository. There are 7 different methods by which we line out an argument. And that's what the book is built around. Cause and effect and analogy and, I can't remember them all right off the top of my head. Example and so forth. Mm-hmm. So I took those and laid them out and said, all right, now how am I going to explain this? Well, I first have to explain what a 5-paragraph essay is. So they have to know what a thesis statement is, what a concluding statement is, and how things go together, and how you lay your arguments out and ways in which you do that. And then, okay, now here's the format. What I do with that book is I give them 50% of their work is done for them once they understand the formats. I give them an outline, then they gather the information and they dump it into the outline. It's very stylized. The criticisms that my students had when they went on to college was, you need to have more verb and fluff and wow in your writing. You're just so direct. But only people who said that were their English teachers. All their other teachers said, you write well. We can understand it. You got something to say.
Right.
So,
right. So in the format.
So I teach them the paragraph. Each of those, there's 7 different paragraphs. And then I show them how to build a 5-paragraph essay with an opening paragraph, closing paragraph, inner middle paragraphs, and so on and so forth, and how all that's put together. I say, now we're going to do it with each of the formats that you learned in the paragraph. We're going to apply them to the essay, the 5-paragraph essay.
Okay. And then they practice. There's some other things in here that you have, like writing a complaint letter, different things. Like you have other communication styles as well, as right, and on top of the 5-paragraph.
Well, there's kind of the sides in there, and there's a section on letters and resumes and all that, and one of the key factors in there, and I mean, if this people never even buy the book and they get this particular idea, they are big time ahead. My son was absent for a week. He was going to the Christian school I was sending to while I was still teaching in the public school. It was 6th grade, and they had to do a paper. And my wife said, well, you're going to have to help him. And I said, okay. So I found out what the whole scenario was, and I had 3 different pieces of information, books, that he could look at. And I said, what I want you to do is I want you to take this book, and I want you to take a set of note cards. And for each paragraph that you read, I want you to write 15 words or less, 1 sentence, that you think is the main idea of that paragraph. And then note it. And I showed him how to do that. So one night, this book, next night, that book, next night, that book. Okay, fine. We put those books away. Now, we take all your cards and we lay them out and we organize them, and now we write your paper. And so he did. Now, did he pick the things that I thought were most important? Not necessarily. Did he say it the way I would have said it? No way. But he got it done, and he turned it in, and it was fine, and he got a decent grade. 6th grade. So I taught format writing to my kid in the 6th grade, but that was the key. 1 15 words or less sentence per paragraph. Then you're done with it.
Okay.
And so it's your information. Then you have the format, you drop it in the format, and bingo. I did a video series. In fact, I'm throwing them away now because they're old VHS format, in Florida for a company. And the fellow who was behind camera came out and he said, where were you when I needed you? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, I got 2 advanced degrees. You just cut my work in half. He said, I was reinventing the wheel every time I wrote a paper. And that's the problem. You don't have to do that. My students would go on to college, and I said, you can go and you can make money from other kids. They'll do all the work. You just put it together for them. They'd come and do that. They would say, you're right. I'm making money, and they do all the work, and I just lay it all out for them. Say, here, write it this way.
So each paragraph starts off with a sentence, the main idea. Is that what?
Right.
Okay.
The thesis statement for that particular paragraph.
Okay. And then you kind of build around that thesis statement from there. Interesting. Awesome. Well, and then we do have the DVDs for the grammar and the format writing, and that was actually you teaching the class, right?
The DVDs for the grammar are me actually teaching how to do each lesson. They're very teacher instructive. The DVD for the format writing is I take a block of the book and I explain what's going on there, but it's also motivational. I'm saying, look, this is not rocket science. You can do this. Anybody can do this. The reason you haven't been able to do it is because you haven't been instructed how to do it.
Right.
I'm going to show you how to do it, and you can do it.
Right.
Yeah.
We enjoyed when we previewed the DVDs. The sales team watched it, and we enjoyed seeing a very systematic approach to this is how you do it, and you broke it down, here's a skeleton, the bones, now build upon that. And so it was very easy to understand from that concept. So for sure. Well, Brody, I do appreciate you joining me and helping me understand this. And we certainly are
now,
privileged.
I have another thing to mention to you. Are you aware that I have 10 YouTubes for the punctuation?
Yes, but I don't know that I probably need to link those. Yeah. Are they're on YouTube?
I have never put them on my I've never put them on a DVD to try to sell them. I just did them and put them up there. But that goes through the major punctuation section of the book.
Okay. I will do a link. I will link that to the product. So we'll make sure that people have access to that for sure. Is that in a playlist? Do you know? Are they all in a playlist? Or are they're just all up on YouTube?
I don't know what you mean by a playlist.
Okay.
They're all on my site. You can go there and click on and you can see a list of them.
Okay. Yeah, we'll make sure that people have access to that then. I remember seeing them, but I remember they weren't in a DVD format. And
right.
Yeah, so, okay. Thank you for reminding me.
But I think they could be made into a DVD format, that's what I'm telling you.
Okay. It's a good idea. Absolutely. Good. Thank you. I appreciate you reminding me of that for sure. So, well, we do appreciate you allowing us the privilege of carrying and representing your product. And we've had a lot of success with it. And I'm happy to see it back in the market, being promoted heavily, and families using it. And I think this will really help us know how to position it as well in the product line that we have. So,
well, I'm pleased that you guys are selling it. It was, I was to the point where, what am I going to do? I'm 77 years old. I mean, it's time to retire, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And I needed to pass it on. None of my kids were interested. There weren't any suitors coming around with their bouquets saying, hey, so when Israel Wayne put us together, I thought, well, this is God's way of helping us both out and keeping it in front of the people.
Yes.
Because they have worked well. I've got, like you said, there's lots of testimonies. I got testimony on there from a gal that had gone on to college and used my material and now teaching and using the material. And, it's amazing. I'm very gratified. You can't eat that, but you can, it's good for the soul.
It is. Although when you built the company, you did it in the hard days when you actually had to be out there, every convention, and it was a different world. Although we did do 32 conventions, I think, this year. It might not have been that many. It's like 25 conventions, major conventions this year, East Coast and West Coast. And the catalog was sent. I think they printed off over 100,000 catalogs. So, and that on top of the distributors that we work with and the resellers that we work with, it's definitely gotten a lot of exposure. But this group that we're broadcasting in today, this is we absolutely adore this group. There's about 17,000 moms in this group. They give us a lot of feedback. If they have questions or they need clarification, they're quick to ask us, like, can you help me understand this better? And so I think this video really will help a lot of moms understand how to apply this and also how it fits. Understanding the methodology, I think, is going to be real valuable.
Well, that's good. I still answer questions via email off of my website, and I'm still keeping it alive, but the day is going to come when it will disappear along with all of the back issues. I've written 108 newsletters, I think.
Wow.
So, and it's all self-generated. I don't copy anybody's stuff. It's all just, my experience generating, explaining things, whatever, and book reviews.
Is that JS Grammar?
That's jsgrammar.com.
Okay. Okay.
But that, someday that'll disappear. I mean, I don't, I don't know when it's going to happen. And I always have ideas to write about, which is a good thing. At least I can remember some things. So I have to share one other thing with you. Andrew Pudawa and I were at a convention together, a very small one down on the south coast of California. He was living in Atascadero at the time, and I had friends there. And my daughter and my son-in-law, my son and his wife, and my sister live in Solvang, which was like only 30 miles away. So I said, I'll come and do the convention there, and I'll write the trip off, And so Andrew came over and he said, Brody Jensen. I said, yes, Andrew. And he had a very interesting story. I like his stuff. And he said, I have to tell you, I have never heard a bad word about your stuff. And I thought that was pretty high praise, because I'm sure he's heard plenty, and I've heard plenty complaints about other curriculums.
Yeah.
But his methodology and mine are different. He is looking at style, and I'm looking at form.
Okay, that's good.
So they're very complementary.
Okay. So when you say form, it's more the bones, really, making sure the bones are solid.
I'm looking at the organization of it all.
Okay.
And he's looking at the expression of it.
Gotcha. He uses.
And they're both valid.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I've been keeping notes here, making notes for myself, so I appreciate it. Well, again, thank you for joining me today. And I do appreciate you making time for this and learning Skype. Me too. This is our busiest season, and it's incredible the sales we've had this year. The Lord has blessed Master Books incredibly, and a lot of the crew is in the warehouse packing orders right now. So normally I have more help, but yeah, it's a beautiful thing to have. But I'm like, I have to call down to the warehouse to see if anybody can come help me get the cameras going. So, and for all the moms that are watching, we really appreciate everything you do. Thank you for the honor of your time to be able to present before you this awesome program. And if you have any questions, we'll be watching the comments, and the moderators and staff will try to answer any questions you have. So, hey, everybody, God bless you, and have a fantastic week.
All right. God bless you too.